This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the U.S. and Iran face off in a high-stakes showdown in the Middle East. Could this lead to war in the region? Plus, U.S. diplomats and evangelical Christians celebrate the one-year anniversary of the American embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Plus, Eurovision, the world's longest-running song contest, comes to Israel. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Iran's ambassador to the United Kingdom accused the United States of playing a very dangerous game and dragging Iran into an unnecessary war. Yet the U.S. says new intelligence shows Iran is posing a clear and present danger to the U.S. military in the region. It's also instructed all non-essential U.S. personnel to leave the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. It's all part of a growing showdown between the U.S. and the Islamic Republic of Iran. President Trump denied a New York Times report the administration has a plan to send 120,000 U.S. troops to the region.
Would I do that? Absolutely. But we have not planned for that. Hopefully we're not going to have to plan for that. And if we did that, we'd send a hell of a lot more troops than that.
While criticizing U.S. moves in the Persian Gulf as dangerous, Iran's ambassador to Britain added Iran is prepared for any showdown.
We have renounced any escalation, military escalation in the region. I would assure you that Iranian government and Iranian armed forces are fully ready for any eventuality in the region.
Iran accuses the U.S. of deliberately attacking Saudi oil tankers recently in order to blame Iran. Satellite photos and video show the damage to the 4 ships loaded with oil in the Persian Gulf. In the meantime, the U.S. boosted its presence in the region by sending the USS carrier Abraham Lincoln through the Suez Canal and B-52s to Qatar. In the past few days, CBN News joined retired General Jerry Boykin on a fact-finding mission just miles from the Iranian border.
Certainly in Israel, they're a huge threat to Israel, not only because of their growing nuclear capabilities, but because they created and continue to support Hezbollah.
Former Israel ambassador to the U.S. Michael Oren maintains the U.S. is not Iran's only Middle Eastern target.
Iran will try to prove that it can plunge the entire Middle East into war. That's the only way it can get out from under the sanctions, from under Secretary of State Pompeo's conditions.
Oren says both the U.S. and Israel see Iran the same way.
Iran, as the administration has said repeatedly, is the greatest source of instability throughout this entire region. It's the world's greatest sponsor of state terrorism in the world.
The Middle East and the world will be waiting to see what turn this high-stakes showdown will take next. The U.S.-Iran showdown comes during a time of celebration here in Israel of the one-year anniversary of the move of the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. U.S. diplomats, Israeli officials, and many evangelical Christian leaders gathered to commemorate the move. 1 year later, many believe President Trump's decision marked a profound and prophetic moment for the U.S. and Israel. The Friends of Zion Museum hosted the event. Founder Mike Evans believes U.S. President Trump made an historic decision when he moved the embassy.
I'm beyond excited because the president keeps exceeding our expectations. The Golan Heights recognition, and there's more to come. This president gets it. He's a moral clarity president. It's black or white, and that's it.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says President Trump recognized the obvious.
Nobody moves the embassy and nobody recognizes Jerusalem until someone comes who's politically incorrect, brash and unabashed, and one day out of the blue says, that's right, Jerusalem is Israel's capital and I recognize it. And that's what President Donald Trump did.
Embassies belong in Jerusalem, and if you do it, you'll find a year later, it all comes into place.
When the embassy opened on May 14, 2018, many predicted the Middle East would erupt. But U.S. Ambassador David Friedman says 1 year after the move, the Jerusalem embassy has become the new normal.
What's special is how normal it's become. You know, we have 200-300 people showing up every day. We do it with everybody in good spirits.
Friedman announced he's now moved the ambassador's residence to Jerusalem.
Well, first, of course, is the legal significance that we've now fully complied with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, and no one has to sign any more waivers, which was, I think, irritating all of us for so many years. And of course, Jerusalem is where I work. It's where we should live.
Netanyahu said a new Middle East is emerging.
There is a new efflorescence, a new renaissance of relations between us and many of our Arab neighbors and many non-Arab Muslim countries, many more than you can think. And it's true that we're united in our desire to stop Iranian aggression. And I believe that Israel and all the countries of the region and all the countries who seek peace in the world should stand together with the United States against Iranian aggression.
It's the golden age for the state of Israel. I'm meeting with Arab leaders who are saying, tell Bibi, thank you. Tell Bibi, I don't understand why he gets bad media. He's doing a great job. I'm seeing things in the Muslim world that are astonishing. I believe Netanyahu's legacy will be peace with 5 to 6 Gulf states.
Coming up, evangelical Christians celebrate the one-year anniversary of the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem and pray for other nations to follow.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place, from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
CBN Israel, standing with Israel and blessing God's people. Join us. Get breaking news from the Holy Land. Witness biblical history uncovered. Learn the true story of Israel through groundbreaking films. Help Holocaust survivors and other Israelis in need. Be part of the redemptive story God is telling through His chosen people. CBN Israel. Together we will stand. Join CBN Israel today.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Protect your sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
The 2 nations that have moved their embassies to Jerusalem are the United States and Guatemala. Some Christians see 3 biblical principles at work. First, in Genesis chapter 12, it says that those who bless Israel will be blessed. Second, they see the example of King Cyrus of Persia, who 2,500 years ago allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. And third, they see nations today deciding to become either what the Bible calls sheep nations or goat nations, depending on how they relate to Israel. These Christian leaders from around the world came to Jerusalem to mark the one-year anniversary of the move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and to pray.
We pray for your presence and your spirit to continue to be upon them.
So this is kind of like a gathering of key leaders, apostles, prophets, pastors, who already have not only the understanding of Genesis 12:1-3, but the understanding of the importance of aligning nations to Israel to become a sheep nation. The whole thing is taking the example of President Trump as a modern-day Cyrus to pray and mobilize for other Cyruses to rise up in their nations.
Mario Bramnick heads up the Latino Coalition for Israel.
Our vision is to be one of the main voices of the Hispanic world in support of Israel. Recently, the Lord gave us a word to go to Latin American nations and meet with presidents. And the Lord has opened those doors, meet with churches and Jewish leadership to encourage their following suit of the movement of the embassy.
Bramnick sees a new season unfolding.
We are in a Cyrus moment where God is opening supernatural doors for President Trump, President Bolsonaro, Morales, and others, which aren't your typical politicians at all, but those that are marked by God for end-time movement.
One of those nations is Guatemala. Guatemala became the first nation after the United States to move their embassy 1 year ago to Jerusalem.
We believe this is a great time to celebrate together and the beginning of a new stage in our relationship. So instead of just becoming friends, we become allies, allies of Israel and allies of the United States.
It's a great privilege that comes with a huge responsibility to tell the world what is right and to be able to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and being here present also to be able to make that happen. And the only Christian ambassador in Jerusalem and the only one from Latin America also, trying to inspire more nations to come also and follow our steps like the United States.
The First Lady spoke about the blessings that came to Guatemala by their obedience on the movement of the embassy.
They honored U.S. Ambassador David Friedman.
I grew up in a small neighborhood where, we kind of lived within, as they used to call it, a shtetl. So to see how the Jewish people have so many friends, it's deeply, deeply moving, and I'm deeply appreciative.
Bramnick says it's an important time for the nations.
This is a critical time. God has given us a practical litmus test on the movement of the embassy for those nations that are willing. The Lord said, go to nations without prejudging, like an evangelist will. Just preach the word. And the Lord also said that it is more for the nations than it is for us or for Israel, because as the nations take of this grace window, God's going to open up the heavenly windows and pour out his blessings and reign and prosperity over nations.
Coming up, the true story of how Syria almost became a nuclear power and what Israel did to stop it.
A historic bond between the Jewish people and the land of Israel cannot be broken.
Now on Blu-ray or DVD, the new CBN documentary special, The Hope, The Rebirth of Israel.
History is knocking on the door. Things are changing.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Israel The Hope to receive your copy of the CBN documentary special, The Hope, The Rebirth of Israel, for a gift of $10 or more. Now on Blu-ray or DVD.
Once he declares the state of Israel, they're all going to come after us.
Go on an extraordinary journey as Gordon Robertson explores the founding of Israel and meet the heroes who made history.
The United States recognizes the new state of Israel.
The Hope, The Rebirth of Israel can be yours on Blu-ray or DVD for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com/Israel The Hope. Call now.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times best-selling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
For years, the danger of an Iranian nuclear weapon has been the main concern for Israel and also many in the West. But did you know Syria came dangerously close to getting its own nuclear weapon? Take a look. On September 6, 2007, Israeli warplanes flew on one of the most important covert missions in Israel's history. Their goal? Destroy a secret Syrian nuclear reactor built by North Korea in the middle of the Syrian desert. At stake was the survival of the Jewish state and the future of the Middle East. U.S. President George W. Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney in Washington, and Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert in Jerusalem debated the high-stakes gamble of destroying the site. In his new book, Shadow Strike, Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief Yaakov Katz tells the inside story of espionage, political courage, and how Israel stopped Syria from becoming a global nuclear nightmare with historic implications. CBN's Gordon Robertson spoke with author Yaakov Katz about this historic mission.
Well, Yaakov Katz, the author of Shadow Strike, joins us now from New York, and let me congratulate you on this book. It's a page-turner. Reads like a spy novel, and yet it's true. How did you get such inside information?
You know, as time passes, people start to talk. Initially, after the operation and the immediate aftermath, and I'd say for the first few years, there was complete silence on the Israeli side. And this was actually part of a kind of a goal that they didn't want to talk and embarrass the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. And they figured that if they stayed quiet, Assad would not retaliate, and that kind of worked. But we're now over 10 years later, and a few years ago, I decided to start looking into it a little deeper. It had always intrigued me. I was always curious about this amazing mission, which, like you said, brings together espionage, political courage, military might, the Jewish state really standing up for what's right. And I also have to say, to some extent, there was probably God's hand was involved here as well. The luck that Israel was able to discover this reactor and take it out in time before it became active was really something of amazing, amazing historical proportion.
Well, tell us about the luck involved here, because it seems unusual that they would have found it. Syria was doing everything they could to disguise it, had a very remote area. How did they find it?
Well, that's totally right, Gordon. Syria was building this far in the desert. They had disguised the reactor as just another plain-looking building, looked like just this concrete structure, almost like a warehouse along the Euphrates River, not far from the border with Turkey and Iraq. Israel discovered it. It had some suspicions that Syria was doing something in the nuclear realm. It saw some cooperation with North Korea, and we know that North Korea and Syria for decades have been working together on the development and manufacturing of ballistic missiles. But never did anyone think it would also include some nuclear cooperation. And then a raid by the Mossad, Israel's equivalent of the CIA, on a hotel room in Vienna, Austria, on the room of Syria's head of its own atomic agency. And they discovered on his computer photos of a nuclear reactor. In one of the photos, probably the one that really blew everyone's mind, was you saw the head of the Syrian Atomic Agency standing next to a man of Asian ethnicity, an individual from North Korea, who it turned out was actually one of the people who was negotiating with the United States over North Korea's nuclear program. So at the same time that North Korea was allegedly or purportedly negotiating how to stop its nuclear program, it was actually proliferating nuclear technology to another rogue state in the Middle East.
Walk us through the story of how the head of Mossad then reveals these photographs to the CIA, to the Bush administration. Doesn't seem like that they were really in the know on this, and here is undeniable evidence North Korea is building a nuclear reactor in Syria. What was the reaction at the highest levels of the U.S. government?
Well, so in April of 2007, just a few weeks after that Mossad raid that I spoke about in Vienna, the head of the Mossad at the time, an individual by the name of Meir Dagan, who's no longer with us, he passed away a few years ago, walks into the White House for a meeting with then the National Security Advisor, Steve Hadley, one of his deputies, Elliot Abrams, and a surprise guest, the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. And they sit down in Hadley's office, and Dagan lays out the photos, puts them on the table, and starts showing them off one by one. The Americans were blown away. They had In their wildest dreams, they didn't imagine that North Korea, which they were in the midst of negotiating with how to end their own nuclear program, was actually proliferating and selling this technology to Syria. Now, remember where the U.S. was back in 2007. It was fighting a war in Iraq. It was fighting a war in Afghanistan. It didn't need this trouble. President Bush had enough on his plate, and then Israel comes with this undeniable evidence, really, that Syria was building a nuclear reactor, a potential nightmarish scenario, not just for Israel, when a country on its border, which has declared that it wants Israel to disappear, is on the verge of obtaining a capability that could allow it to do that, but also for the U.S., which is deep in the Middle East and wants to stabilize the situation, now sees another state possibly on the verge of getting nuclear weapons. This was a nightmare of global proportions, not to mention just Syria, but also North Korea. What was it doing selling this nuclear technology? This was a huge story.
The U.S. doesn't really come across all that great in the book, and you're telling the facts of the story. It seems like they were the pendulum had swung from weapons of mass destruction as being the reason for the invasion of Iraq, and here you have visible proof that Syria is trying to acquire weapons of mass destruction, and yet the U.S. decides that they should not act, they should not take out the reactor. Tell us why.
Bush, ultimately, there were a series of debates and conferences. He held most of them actually in what they call the Yellow Oval. It's up in the residence. He wanted these conversations off the books. These were highly classified discussions that were taking place in the United States because Israel's prime minister at the time, Ehud Olmert, came to Washington and said to President Bush, I want you to take it out. This is not an Israeli issue. This is an American problem. This is a global problem. And I think what Olmert was actually thinking was that if he could get Bush, if Bush would take responsibility for what was happening in Syria, it would send a greater message to Iran, and it possibly would have avoided the disastrous nuclear deal that the United States under Barack Obama then reached with Iran just a few years ago. So he was thinking in greater and more strategic consequences. But what ultimately I think was at play was, like I mentioned before, Iraq, Afghanistan, the failure of the intelligence agencies in the United States to accurately determine what was happening in Iraq when it came to weapons of mass destruction. And I think there was some fear among some members of the U.S. administration, particularly Condoleezza Rice and Bob Gates, Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense at the time, who felt that Israel might have had too much influence over Bush, and therefore they were pushing for a more diplomatic solution to all of this. The one person who actually stood up, I think, and really, when I look at this book, and I came in, I tried to look at everything objectively. I had some thoughts about what I felt towards the Bush administration, what I felt about Ehud Olmert, who we all know eventually went to jail for corruption charges. But really, Dick Cheney, for example, stood up and said, this is something that America needs to take care of. This is an issue that America needs to show responsibility and determination. And Olmert, for all of his flaws and failures, which we then saw him eventually, like I mentioned, go to jail, stood up when he got that phone call in July of 2007 from President Bush, who said, look, I'm not going to attack. Prime Minister Olmert said to him, this is unacceptable, and if you won't do it, I will have to do what's right for the state of Israel. So you really saw also a lesson, I would say, not just in espionage, in military might, but also in what statesmanship is really supposed to be like.
Up next, Israel hosts the biggest song contest in the world, Eurovision, when we come back.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
By sharing their knowledge.
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
And their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Some 200 million people are expected to watch the annual Eurovision Song Contest. This year, the live event is in Israel, although the BDS movement and Hamas tried to stop it. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl found out, it didn't work.
For Israel, hosting Eurovision is an opportunity to impress an audience that wouldn't necessarily have visited the Holy Land.
I thought life would be a little less normal than in other countries, but it's actually pretty standard. Like, I don't know, I'm staying in a suburb nearby that feels a little bit like California in a way.
There's a lot of excitement here on the grounds where the 2019 Eurovision Song Contest is taking place. More than 40 countries have come up to Tel Aviv for this year's contest. Israel got the chance to host the event because its own Netta Barzilai won the contest last year in Portugal. Netta told CBN News why she thinks people should watch the show.
It's the cheesiest, corniest, funnest thing to watch. It's like, it's the bad songs are so fun, and the good songs are so fun. It's fun.
The anti-Israel BDS movement launched a campaign to convince artists and fans to boycott the competition. While a handful of protesters came to Tel Aviv, no contestant backed out.
We are living with the Palestinians. They make business with us, we make business with them, and they don't boycott us and we don't boycott them. So why people who are from abroad want to boycott Israel?
It doesn't matter the politics. It's the music that makes me come here.
Israel countered with its own BDS campaign, showing a land that's beautiful, diverse, sensational. 2 weeks before the competition, Hamas and other terror groups launched a massive rocket attack on southern Israel, and even that didn't slow the show's followers.
Of course, we heard about the bombs 2 weeks ago, and you're asking yourself, okay, is it sure, is it safe to travel there? But I wasn't afraid at any time.
No place is completely secure, so I think there is no really big risks here now in Israel.
Israel's contestant this year is Kobi Marimi. Some 1,500 journalists from more than 40 countries and some 10,000 tourists are expected to arrive for this extravaganza that's costing more than $30 million. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
As you can see, Israelis are quite excited that Eurovision is here in Israel. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.